Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be telling to somebody here, but my life has gone off the rails in a way I never could have imagined. I need to get this out because I feel like I'm losing my mind. My name's Andrew, and I've been married to Laura for 6 years. We live in Chicago, have decent jobs, and for the most part, I thought we were happy. Sure, we had our ups and downs. Who doesn't? But I never saw any red flags until recently. Lately, Laura's been distant. And I don't mean in the I'm tired from work kind of way. I mean she's somewhere else completely. She's always on her phone and not just casually scrolling. She hides it from me. She used to leave it on the table charging overnight, but now it's always with her. She takes it to the bathroom, keeps it face down, and if I walk into the room while she's texting, she immediately locks it. She's coming home later and later. There's always an excuse, work meetings, last minute plans with her friends, just needed some fresh air. But when I ask for details, she gets defensive. She stopped initiating sex, and when I try, it's like she's just going through the motions. I tried to talk to her. Last week, I sat her down and said, Laura, is something wrong? You've been acting weird lately. Her response? Pure gaslighting. Oh my God, Andrew, are you serious? I've just been stressed, and now you're accusing me of something. I wasn't accusing her of anything. Is it I just wanted to understand? But she made me feel like I was crazy for even asking. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe I was overthinking it. But then last night, I found proof that something is very, very wrong. And I don't know how to process it. Last night, I decided to do something nice for Laura. I thought maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe she really is just stressed, and I've been making it worse, so I planned a romantic dinner. Her favorite meal, candles, the whole thing. I even bought a damn bottle of wine that cost more than I'd ever normally spend. I texted her, hey, I have a surprise for you tonight. Come home early. No response. An hour passed. Then two. I called her. Straight to voicemail. That's when the sinking feeling hit me. I sat at the dining table, staring at the half-prepared meal in front of me, my appetite completely gone. My gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. Laura had never been this unavailable before. Sure, she'd been distant lately, but outright ignoring my calls? That wasn't like her. I decided to check if she left anything around, maybe a note, a work schedule, something that would explain why she was so damn absent all the time. That's when I noticed her laptop was still open. Laura is usually paranoid about security. She locks everything, her phone, her emails, even her laptop. But for some reason, she must have left in a hurry because it was still logged in. I hesitated. I knew it was wrong. I knew invading her privacy wasn't something a good husband does, but at that moment, I didn't care. I moved the mouse, bringing up the screen. Her email was open, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just some work messages. Then, on impulse, I clicked on her browser history. And there it was, a hotel address. At first, I didn't react. My brain refused to accept what I was seeing. I clicked on it, my pulse hammering in my ears. It wasn't just an address. It was a reservation confirmation for tonight, room 214. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Maybe it's a work thing. Maybe she's planning a surprise for me. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. But deep down, I already knew. Laura was meeting someone at that hotel, and I was about to find out who. I don't even remember grabbing my keys. 1 second, I was staring at Laura's laptop screen, heart pounding, hands shaking. The next, I was in my car, speeding toward the hotel. My brain kept trying to find excuses. Maybe it's a work event. Maybe she's meeting a friend who's going through a rough time. Maybe I'm just being insane. But no matter how many times I tried to lie to myself, the truth kept creeping in. Laura had been acting strange for months. The phone glued to her side, the late nights, the way she looked at me like she wasn't even there anymore. And now a secret hotel reservation? I wasn't stupid. I knew what this looked like. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I barely registered the red lights I ran, the other cars honking as I weaved through traffic. My mind was laser focused on one thing: catching her, catching them. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I felt like I was going to throw up. It wasn't some five-star luxury resort. It was mid-tier, the kind of place people go when they don't want to be seen. I sat in the car for a second, breathing hard, trying to calm the storm inside me. Then I got out. The lobby was empty except for a half-asleep receptionist at the front desk. I walked straight past her toward the elevator. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I pressed the button for the third floor. Ding. The doors opened and I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, room 2814.I. I walked toward it slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. My breath was coming in sharp, shallow gasps. Then I heard voices, a woman's, Laura's, and a man's. I stopped dead in my tracks. What? My whole body tensed. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were laughing, like this was just a normal night for them. Like they weren't ripping my heart out behind that door. I felt a surge of pure rage. I wanted to kick the door down, storm in, and catch them in the act. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they'd been caught. My hand clenched into a fist. I stepped forward, ready to end this, but then, at the last second, I stopped. I wasn't thinking clearly, I was too emotional, and if I walked in there right now, I wouldn't get the truth. I'd get lies, excuses, gaslighting. No, I needed to be smart. I turned on my phone's voice recorder and held it close to the door. If Laura was really cheating, I was going to catch her, and this time, there would be no way out. I stood outside room 214, my phone clenched in my hand, the voice recorder running. I didn't breathe, I didn't move. I just stood there, listening. Laura's voice was muffled, but I could hear the playfulness in her tone. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough laughter, soft giggles. And the man's voice? Deep, casual, confident, not mine, not someone I recognized. I felt my fist clench as I heard movement inside. The sound of rustling fabric. Was it sheets? Clothes? The unmistakable creak of a bed frame. I swallowed hard, my stomach churning with nausea. I wanted to kick the door in right then and there. I wanted to see her face when she realized I knew. I wanted to see the shock in her lover's eyes when he saw me standing there, not some clueless, pathetic husband, but a man who knew exactly what was going on. But I didn't. No, I forced myself to hold back. Because if I barged in now, she'd just lie to my face. She'd gaslight me, tell me I was being paranoid, come up with some excuse so ridiculous that I'd almost believe it. I couldn't risk that. I needed proof, so instead, I stood there a little longer, letting my phone's recorder capture everything. Then, I turned and walked straight out of the hotel, my hands shaking with anger. When I got home, I was running on pure adrenaline. Laura still wasn't back. Of course she wasn't. I sat down at the kitchen table, gripping my phone so tightly I thought I might crack it. I replayed the recording, listening to the faint murmurs of their conversation, the laughter, the sounds of movement. It wasn't enough. I needed more. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I installed hidden cameras around the house, one in the living room, covering the entrance, one in the hallway leading to our bedroom, and one inside our bedroom. I knew how this looked. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't some desperate, crazy move from an unhinged husband. It was self-defense. If Laura was bringing her lover into our home, into our bed, I was going to see it with my own eyes. I set up the cameras, tested the motion-activated recording, and checked the feed on my phone. Everything was in place. Now, all I had to do was wait. Laura came home around midnight. I was sitting in the dark, pretending to be asleep, my back turned to her. I heard the front door open, the sound of her heels clicking against the floor, the slight hesitation before she walked toward the bedroom. She didn't say anything, didn't even look at me. She just slipped into bed, careful not to wake me, and let out a soft sigh. I caught the faintest whiff of perfume, but not hers. Something stronger, musky, male. I clenched my jaw and kept my breathing steady, because I knew where she had been. I knew who she had been with, and now I had everything I needed to catch her. And once I had the proof, I was going to burn her whole world down. The next morning, Laura acted like nothing happened. She woke up early, stretched, and gave me a casual good morning like she hadn't just come home reeking of another man. I played along. I forced myself to act normal, to pretend like I hadn't been lying awake all night staring at the ceiling, picturing her in that hotel room, laughing with someone who wasn't me. "Morning," I mumbled, taking a sip of my coffee. Laura went about her routine, making herself a smoothie, checking her phone every few seconds, barely looking at me. I wondered if she even felt guilty. I had to fight the urge to grab her phone and demand she show me her messages, to make her look me in the eye and admit what she did. But I didn't, because I didn't need her words anymore. I had the cameras, and soon I'd have proof. Later that day, while Laura was out running errands, I locked myself in my office and pulled up the hidden camera feed on my phone. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the footage, scanning for anything unusual. Then, I found something. My heart pounded as I clicked on the time-stamped recording from 2 nights ago. This was it. The moment Laura had brought her lover into our home. I pressed play, expecting to see the worst. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Because the man on the screen was me. I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. No, that wasn't possible. I wasn't home that night. I had been out working late. I had a receipt from a gas station across town to prove it, but there I was, clear as day, walking through the front door, laughing with Laura, acting completely normal. My mind reeled. I scrubbed through the footage, watching as I, or someone who looked exactly like me, sat on the couch with Laura, had a drink, even kissed her before disappearing into the bedroom. I stared at the screen, my body frozen in place. This wasn't right. This didn't make sense. I rewound the video, playing it again and again, searching for any sign that it was fake, that it was some kind of trick. But there was none. It was real footage. It was me, but I had no memory of it. I slowly lowered my phone, my chest tightening, my pulse hammering in my ears. If Laura wasn't cheating, then who the hell was I watching on that screen, and why didn't I remember being there? I didn't sleep that night. I kept watching the footage over and over, hoping to find something, anything that would explain what I was seeing. But every time it was the same. Me walking through the front door, me smiling at Laura, me acting like everything was fine. Only I had no memory of it, not a single second. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was just exhausted, that maybe stress had messed with my head. But deep down, I knew this was something else, something worse. The next morning, I made an appointment with my doctor. I walked into the clinic, feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. I explained my symptoms as calmly as I could: memory loss, blackouts, feeling disconnected from time. But I left out the part about my own face showing up on security footage doing things I didn't remember doing. I wasn't about to sound like a paranoid lunatic. Dr. Patel, my physician for the past 5 years, listened carefully, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. Andrew, how long has this been happening? I hesitated. I don't know. A few weeks, maybe longer? He nodded. Have you been under a lot of stress lately? I almost laughed. Yeah, you could say that. He sighed and flipped through my chart. I think we should run some tests. There are a few conditions that could explain short-term memory loss, but I want to rule out anything serious first. I nodded, my hands clenched in my lap. Like what? I asked. He gave me a careful look. We'll start with neurological tests, brain scans, cognitive exams, to rule out anything like a tumor or early onset dementia. A tumor? My stomach dropped. Do you think it's something like that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I doubt it, Dr. Patel said quickly. With symptoms like these, we need to be thorough, and if the scans come back normal, we'll look into psychological factors, things like dissociative disorders. I frowned. Dissociative disorders? It's rare, but some people experience memory loss due to extreme stress or trauma. In very uncommon cases, people can even develop alternate identities to cope with situations they can't handle consciously. I stared at him. Alternate identities? No. No, that wasn't possible. That was something out of movies, something that happened to other people. Not to me. Still. But then I thought about the security footage. The other me. Laughing, drinking, kissing Laura, living a life I didn't remember, the gaps in my memory that had been happening more and more lately, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure anymore. Waiting for answers, Dr. Patel scheduled me for a series of tests, neurological scans, blood work, cognitive evaluations, and told me he'd call as soon as the results came in. As I walked out of the clinic, my head was spinning. If this was medical, if something was happening to my brain, then at least I had an explanation. At least I could fix it. But if it wasn't, if this was something deeper, something that had been inside me all along, then I didn't just have a problem. I had a stranger living inside me, and I had no idea what he wanted. The next few days were the longest of my life. I kept my distance from Laura, watching her carefully, trying to see if she acted different, if she knew more than she was letting on, because now a terrifying thought had burrowed into my brain. What if she knew? What if she had been lying to me this whole time, not because she was cheating, but because she had been keeping something else hidden? Something about me. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I waited for my test results and did what I had been too afraid to do before. I started looking for more gaps in my memory, and what I found made my blood run cold. I went through my phone, checking old text messages, recent calls, even my GPS history. And that's when I noticed something strange. For the past few months, there were entire nights missing from my logs. No messages, no calls, no activity, like I had just vanished. But it wasn't just that. I checked my credit card statements and found transactions I didn't remember making, bars I had never been to, expensive drinks I had never ordered, purchases from stores I had never stepped foot in. It wasn't random. It was like someone else had been living my life, using my money, my car, my name, and that's when I found it. A receipt from the same hotel where I had followed Laura that night, dated 2 weeks before. Same hotel, same room number, 214. And the name on the receipt, Andrew Carter, my own goddamn name. I dropped my phone, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't possible. Had I been there before? Had I made that reservation? Had I walked into that same hotel, checked into that same room, and lived a different life without even remembering it? I felt sick. Because if this was true, if this wasn't just memory loss, but something deeper, then it meant I hadn't just been losing time, I had been losing myself. Me, that night I sat in the dark, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Who the hell was I? And who was the other Andrew? Because it was clear now, he wasn't just some hallucination. He was real. He had my face, my voice, my name, but he wasn't me. He was someone else. Someone who had been taking control of my body. Someone who had been living a separate life. And the worst part? Laura might have known the whole time. I needed answers. And tomorrow, I was going to get them, one way or another. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed next to Laura, listening to her slow, steady breathing, my mind racing with everything I had discovered. The missing memories, the receipts, the other me, and the fact that Laura might have known all along. I had to confront her. The next morning, I woke up before she did. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping my coffee mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. When she finally came downstairs, she gave me a sleepy smile. Morning, I didn't smile back. Sit down, I said, my voice cold. Her expression shifted instantly, confusion, then concern. What's wrong? She asked, sitting across from me. I took a deep breath. I know. Her body stiffened. I pulled out my phone and opened the receipt from the hotel. I turned the screen toward her. This, 2 weeks ago, room 214, under my name. Her face drained of color. I don't, she started, but I cut her off. Don't lie to me, Laura. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. Jazzo. My name is Andrew, I snapped. Her breath hitched. I saw it. The way her eyes widened just a fraction, like she had just been caught in something. You know, don't you? I asked, my voice quieter now, more dangerous. She didn't respond. You've known this whole time, haven't you? Tears welled up in her eyes. She shook her head quickly. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. She flinched, then broke down. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, I didn't cheat on you, Andrew. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth. I pushed myself from my seat, and then I stared at her, my whole body tense. What truth? She wiped at her face, her whole body shaking. You've been different for a long time. I didn't know what was happening at first, but then I started noticing the changes. Changes? She nodded. You'd leave at night and not remember it the next day. I swallowed hard. I knew that part was true. You started dressing differently, talking differently, and then you started calling yourself something else. I went cold. What? What was the name? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Laura looked me dead in the eyes and said, Jason. The world tilted. That's not possible, I said, my voice shaking. I thought I was going crazy, Laura continued, sobbing now. At first, I thought you were just messing with me, but then Jason started acting like a completely different person. He didn't recognize things in our house. He didn't even seem to know he was married. I clutched my head, my breathing ragged. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. She sniffled. Because Jason told me not to. I froze. He knew? She nodded slowly. He told me you wouldn't understand, that you weren't ready to know about him, that if I ever told you, he'd make sure you never came back. My blood turned to ice. There wasn't just another version of me, there was another man living inside my head. And he had been hiding from me this whole time. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I need air, I muttered, storming toward the door. Laura grabbed my wrist. Andrew, please. Stop calling me that, I shouted, yanking my hand away. She gasped, covering her mouth, like she had just realized what she said. And honestly, so did I. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if Andrew was even real anymore. I walked out of the house, barely able to think straight. My mind was spinning. Everything around me felt unreal, like I was stuck in some twisted nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Jason, a name I had never heard before, a person I had never met. Except he wasn't some stranger. He was me, or at least he was inside me. Laura had known all along. She had seen the changes, the gaps in my memory, the times I disappeared and came back different. She had been living with two versions of me, one she loved and one she didn't even recognize. And the worst part, the other version of me, Jason, had known about it. He had known about me. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind replayed the last few months, looking for signs, trying to pinpoint exactly when this started. But the terrifying thing was, I couldn't. The gaps had been there for a while. At first, they were small things. Forgetting conversations, not remembering what I had for lunch, walking into a room and not knowing why. I had chalked it up to stress, being overworked, or just not paying attention. But now, looking at it clearly, I realized these blackouts weren't random. They were calculated. Someone else, Jason, had been taking control. I opened my phone and scrolled through my call logs. Just like before, I found missing time, calls made to numbers I didn't recognize, texts deleted, transactions I couldn't explain. But now I knew why. Jason had been living a second life while I was asleep in my own mind. The worst part, I had no idea what kind of person he was. I needed answers, fast. I pulled out my doctor's number and called him. It rang twice before he picked up. Andrew, this is unexpected. Is everything okay? No, nothing was okay. I took a deep breath. I need my test results now. There was a pause. I was actually just about to call you. Can you come in? I think we need to talk in person. My stomach dropped. That didn't sound good. Yeah, I muttered, already starting the car. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My own face looked like a stranger's. Who the hell was I? And more importantly, who the hell was Jason? 15 minutes later, I was sitting in my doctor's office, my leg bouncing as I waited for him to speak. Dr. Patel sat across from me, flipping through a file, his expression unreadable. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, he looked up. Andrew, I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. I nodded, gripping the armrests of the chair. The tests ruled out any neurological conditions, he continued. No tumors, no signs of degenerative diseases. Your brain is functioning normally, physically. I exhaled shakily. That was good, right? That meant this wasn't some medical illness. But Dr. Patel wasn't done. That being said, your psychological evaluations indicate something much more complex. Based on everything you've described, your memory gaps, the personality shifts, the changes in behavior, I believe you're experiencing dissociative identity disorder. I blinked. What? He leaned forward. It means your consciousness has split into two separate identities, two distinct personalities that operate independently of each other. One is you, Andrew. The other, from what you've told me, is Jason. And I shook my head. No, that's not possible. That's something that happens in movies, not real life. I'd know if I had something like that. Dr. Patel sighed. Actually, you wouldn't. That's the nature of DID. The personalities take control at different times, and when one is in control, the other has no memory of what happened. I felt like the walls were closing in. So what you're saying is there's another me living in my body, doing things I don't remember? Dr. Patel nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking. So which one of us is real? His expression softened. You both are. But I need you to understand something, Andrew. If Jason is aware of you, and he's been deliberately keeping his existence a secret, then he's not just another personality. He's manipulative. He's hiding from you for a reason. A chill ran down my spine. Jason wasn't just another side of me. He was a threat. I stood up abruptly. I need to go. Dr. Patel looked concerned. Andrew, I strongly advise you to start therapy. I'll think about it, I muttered, already walking toward the door. I couldn't sit here any longer. I needed air. I needed time. I stumbled out of the clinic and into my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. My breathing was uneven, my vision blurred. Jason had been controlling my life. He had been living a second existence behind my back, and I still didn't know what he wanted. I took a deep, shaky breath. I needed to get home. I needed to talk to Laura. Because if she had been dealing with Jason all this time, maybe she knew something I didn't. Maybe she knew how to stop him. The drive home felt like it took forever. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, my brain racing with the weight of what I had just learned. Jason wasn't just some hallucination. He wasn't a stress-induced breakdown or a bad dream. He was real, a second version of me. A side of me that I had never known existed, but who had been living a life parallel to mine. What are you doing? One that had been hiding, manipulating, and, if what Laura said was true, lying to my face for who knows how long, and now I had to face him. Or at least face what he had done. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Laura standing at the window. She looked like she had been waiting for me, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. As soon as I stepped inside, she whispered, "What did the doctor say?" I swallowed, closing the door behind me. "You were right." She exhaled sharply, nodding like she had been expecting this. "Jason," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's real. He's been taking over, living his own life." Laura's eyes filled with tears and she turned away. "I didn't know how to tell you." "How long?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She hesitated. "I started noticing it a year ago. Little things at first. The way you'd forget conversations we had the night before. The way you suddenly hated foods you used to love. You started dressing differently, talking differently. At first I thought it was just stress, but then you called yourself Jason. You looked me dead in the eye and said your name wasn't Andrew." I staggered back, gripping the back of a chair. "I don't remember any of that." She turned to me, her eyes desperate. "That's the thing, Andrew. He remembers everything." A chill ran down my spine. Jason wasn't just another version of me. He wasn't like me at all. He knew. He had always known. Laura kept going. "At first, I thought it was some weird face. But then Jason started pushing boundaries. He'd disappear for entire nights. He'd flirt with other women right in front of me. When I confronted him, he laughed, said I was boring, said you were weak." I clenched my fists. "He said that?" She nodded. "He told me he was in control now, that you were too afraid to do the things he wanted, and that one day you wouldn't come back at all." My blood ran cold. Jason wasn't just another personality. He was trying to erase me. Laura wiped her eyes. "That's why I didn't tell you. I was afraid. I thought if I kept pretending, maybe he would stop. Maybe you'd come back and not remember any of it." I took a shaky breath. "But I did come back, and now I know the truth." Laura stared at me, her voice trembling. "But do you, Andrew? Do you really?" A chill crawled up my spine. She hesitated before whispering, "What if you're the one who's been gone this whole time?" I froze, my breath caught in my throat. What if she was right? What if Jason had been in control for months and I was just now waking up? I felt sick. I needed to get him out of my head. I needed to end this before it was too late. Because if Jason was planning to take over completely, then I was running out of time. I couldn't breathe. Laura's words were echoing in my head. What if you're the one who's been gone this whole time? I felt my knees go weak, and I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. How much time had I lost? Had Jason been in control for weeks, months? Had I just been asleep, buried somewhere in my own mind while he lived my life? I looked at Laura, my heart pounding. I need to stop him. She shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. "How? He's you, Andrew, or you're him. I don't even know anymore." Neither did I. But I knew one thing for sure. If Jason was planning to erase me, I had to fight back. I had to take my mind back. I stormed upstairs, ignoring Laura calling after me, and locked myself in the bathroom. I turned on the sink, splashing cold water on my face, trying to ground myself. Then I looked up at the mirror, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in my own reflection. It was me, but it wasn't. My own face didn't look right. The eyes staring back at me were too calm, too knowing, and then he smirked. Not me. Him. Jason. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. What? What the fuck? His lips moved, but I wasn't talking. "You figured it out," he said. The voice was mine, but the way he spoke, it wasn't. It was smoother, more confident, like he had been waiting for this moment. I gripped the edge of the sink. "You're not real." He tilted his head, his smirk growing. "Aren't I? I've been here a long time, Andrew, longer than you think." My breathing was ragged. "You stole my life." Jason laughed. "Stole? No. I took what you were too afraid to claim. Andrew, you're weak. You always have been. You let people walk all over you. You let Laura pity you. You let life happen to you instead of taking control." I shook my head. "Shut up." "But then I came along," Jason continued, his voice mocking, smooth. "I gave Laura the passion you couldn't. I gave us the confidence you never had. I lived a better life than you ever could. And now," his eyes darkened, "now I don't need you anymore." I gripped my head as a wave of dizziness hit me. It felt like something was pushing me down, like my own mind was trying to suffocate me. Jason was fighting for control. "No!" I gasped, shaking my head violently. "I'm not letting you win." Jason just smirked. "You already lost." I felt myself fading, like I was slipping into the back of my own mind. My hands felt numb, my vision blurred. I could hear Laura pounding on the door, screaming my name, but she sounded so far away. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think about that story. Have a good day, and bye.